Brenda had just finished organizing her files for the week when she spotted an unusual envelope on her desk. No return address, but the handwriting looked like it had been written with a trembling hand. As she opened it, she didn't expect the chilling confession inside. The letter began with a line that sent a shiver down her spine. What was supposed to be the happiest Christmas of my life turned into the beginning of a nightmare. My name is Emily, I'm 32, and until last December, I thought my life was finally falling into place. The letter continued. I had just gotten engaged to Marcus, the man I believed was my soulmate. We had plans to marry in the spring, start a family, and leave the chaos of New York behind to settle in the quiet suburbs of Oregon. Everything was set, the dress, the venue, the guest list. Emily had grown close to Marcus's parents, and she felt a warm connection with his younger sister, Claire. Marcus was charming, intelligent, and had that old-school politeness that made people instantly like him. He was also adopted, which only made Emily love him more for how resilient and emotionally grounded he was. Then came Christmas. It would be their first holiday as an engaged couple. They decided to celebrate it with Emily's family in Minnesota, in the same cozy wooden house where she had grown up. Her parents were thrilled to meet Marcus officially, and her mom had spent weeks preparing every detail, even digging out old family photo albums to show him. That's where it all began. Asterisk, asterisk on Christmas Eve, after dinner and cocoa by the fire. My mom pulled out the old photo albums, smiling with nostalgia. You have to see how adorable Emily was as a toddler, she said, flipping pages filled with faded photos of birthdays, vacations, and messy holiday dinners. Marcus sat beside me on the couch, his arm around my shoulder, smiling politely. When my mom opened the third album, the green one with a ribbon binding, Marcus's grip on my shoulder suddenly tightened. I looked at him, expecting a chuckle or a teasing comment about my sixth-grade haircut, but instead I saw his face drain of color. He leaned forward, staring at one specific picture as if the world had stopped spinning dot in that photo. I was maybe 7. I stood in front of a snowman, wearing a pink snowsuit, beaming. Next to me was a young man, maybe in his late teens, with dark hair and a scarf that my mom used to knit. Marcus stared at that boy, his hands now shaking. Don't you see it? He whispered, almost too low for me to hear. It's me. I laughed awkwardly. What are you talking about? That's my cousin, David. He died in a car accident when he was 20. My mom's expression turned solemn as she nodded. Yes, he passed away 2 weeks after that picture was taken. He was such a good boy. Marcus stood up, eyes wide. No, that can't be. That's me. That's the same jacket I had at 17. The scar on his chin, it's exactly where mine is. And the eyes, those are my eyes. I thought he was joking or maybe making a weird holiday prank. But the look on his face, pure horror, told me otherwise. My heart pounded. Everyone fell silent. Even the fireplace crackles seemed to vanish. Then he asked something that still haunts me to this day. Was David adopted? The question hung in the air like thick smoke. My mom blinked, visibly caught off guard. Adopted? She repeated, her voice uncertain. No, he was your aunt's biological son. Why would you ask that? Marcus didn't answer immediately. He paced the living room, running both hands through his hair, clearly trying to piece something together in his mind. I stood up, uneasy. Marcus, are you okay? What's going on? He turned to face me, but his eyes were distant, like he wasn't really seeing me anymore. Emily, when I was a kid, I had dreams, recurring ones. They always took place in a snowy yard with a pink snowman and a girl in a snowsuit. I thought they were just dreams, you know? But that photo ... it's exactly what I saw. My mom sat down slowly, visibly unsettled. Are you saying you remember that moment, that photo? But you weren't there. Marcus shook his head, almost as if trying to shake the thought loose. I don't know what I'm saying. I just know I've seen that image before in my head for as long as I can remember. And that boy, that's me. Not someone who looks like me. That is me. The room grew colder. My dad, usually skeptical and grounded, looked concerned now. Son, maybe you should sit down. You're not making much sense. But Marcus wasn't finished. He looked straight at my mom and asked, do you know if David had a twin? Or if something strange happened around the time of his death? My mom looked pale now. She exchanged glances with my dad, and I could feel the air shift. Something unspoken was hiding in that silence. There was a time, she began slowly, when your aunt mentioned something bizarre. The night David died, she claimed she saw someone who looked exactly like him walk past her window. Marcus whispered, under his breath, "I need to talk to my parents." We didn't sleep that night. Marcus called his parents and asked if we could visit them the next morning. He didn't mention the photo or the dream, just said it was important. During the drive to their house, he was silent, clenched jaw, fingers tapping nervously against the steering wheel. I could tell he was spiraling inside. His parents lived 2 hours away, in a quiet town tucked behind rolling hills. When we arrived, his mother welcomed us with a warm smile, but it faded quickly when she saw Marcus's face. "What's wrong?" she asked, her eyes jumping between us. "You look like you've seen a ghost." Marcus didn't waste time. He sat her down, took out his phone, and showed her the photo from my mom's album. She stared at it for a long time. Her hands began to tremble slightly, and then she slowly whispered, "Where did you get this?" I told her it came from my mother's album. She stood up abruptly, pacing the kitchen. "It's not possible, this photo. This boy—" She looked at Marcus. "This boy is you." "Exactly," Marcus said. "But I've never been to that house, never seen those people. How can that be me?" His mother sat down again, visibly shaken. "There's something I never told you. Something your father and I kept buried for decades." She looked at her husband, who had just walked in, and froze at the sight of the photo. "He remembers," she said softly. "He knows." Marcus's father closed his eyes, took a long breath, and said, "It's time we tell you everything." We sat around their kitchen table, the photo lying between us like a ticking time bomb. Marcus's father, Daniel, looked older than I'd ever seen him. He poured himself a glass of water, his hand visibly shaking, then began to speak. 30 years ago, he said, your mother and I lived in Baltimore, not here." He glanced at his wife, who nodded with a pained expression. "I worked for a construction company, and we lived in a shared apartment complex. There was a woman in the building, Clara. She had a little girl. I got involved with her when your mother and I were separated for a time." Marcus's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. I could feel his hand gripping mine under the table. "One day," Daniel continued, "Clara vanished. Just packed up and disappeared. No warning, no goodbye. She left the little girl with a note and a baby boy." He looked directly at Marcus now. "That baby was you." The air left the room. Marcus didn't move. I could hear his breath catching, shallow and fast. "You're saying I'm adopted?" Daniel nodded, guilt etched in every wrinkle. "We never told you. We thought if we raised you as ours, you'd never need to know. But seeing that photo again, it means Clara must have reconnected with someone from that time." I whispered, "So that photo, the little girl, was me?" Marcus looked at me like he was seeing me for the first time. Marcus stood up slowly, like his body had suddenly become too heavy. "So you took me in," he said to his parents, his voice hollow, "but you never told me who I really was. And now you're saying my fiancé might be the little girl from my past." His mother, Carol, was already crying, covering her mouth with both hands. Daniel whispered, "We thought we were protecting you. We never imagined the girl in that photo would walk back into your life, let alone become the woman you'd fall in love with." I felt dizzy. My chest ached. I thought of all the things Marcus and I had shared, all the moments we thought were pure. And now every memory was stained with uncertainty. "Clara. Is she still alive?" I asked. Daniel looked down. "We don't know. After she left, we never heard from her again." Marcus turned to me, his face pale, searching mine for something, comfort, truth, anything to anchor him. I felt myself slipping into a kind of emotional freefall. "I need to know," I said. "We need answers. Medical records, adoption papers, anything that can prove whether this is true or just a horrible coincidence." Marcus nodded slowly. "If I really am that boy and you're that girl, then this isn't just about us. It's about everything we thought we knew." Carol finally spoke, her voice shaking. "We kept the papers. They're in the attic." Marcus didn't wait. He moved like a man on fire, charging up the stairs. I followed, every step trembling under the weight of what we might find. Asterisk in the attic. The air was thick with dust and forgotten memories. Old boxes lined the shelves, each labeled with a marker in Carol's careful handwriting. Marcus rummaged through them like a man possessed until he found one labeled Marcus Adoption. His hands trembled as he opened the lid. Inside were yellowed documents, photographs, and a tiny blue blanket. I stood beside him, my heart thudding in my chest. He pulled out a paper and notarized adoption certificate with his name, date of birth, in a blacked out section where the biological parents' names should have been. They erased them, he whispered. He handed me a photo. It was of a little boy, maybe 4 years old, holding hands with a girl in a white dress. The girl looked familiar, uncannily familiar. My throat tightened. "That's me," I said, barely breathing. "That's me." I hadn't seen that photo in decades, but I recognized the scar on my chin. I got it when I fell running through my grandmother's garden. Marcus sat back on the attic floor, stunned. "How is this even possible?" he asked. "We forgot. We were so young, and we were separated." I nodded slowly, tears stinging my eyes. "I never even remembered your face. Until now." There was silence between us, filled only by the soft creaking of the house and the sound of our own stunned breathing. That silence said more than words ever could. We were entangled by fate, history, and a truth too heavy to ignore. We brought the box down from the attic, unable to leave that discovery behind. Sitting at the kitchen table, Marcus stared at the photo in his hands while I tried to process the implications. "Do you think Carol knew?" I asked, my voice barely audible. "She had to," he replied. "Why else would she hide this? Why else would she keep us apart?" I felt a chill rush through me, as if the air in the room had dropped 10 degrees. My mother had always been warm and open, but now her silence looked like something else. Control. I began pulling out more documents. Letters, fragments of old memories that had been locked away in that attic. Among them was a letter unopened, dated 2 years before Marcus and I met. It was addressed to me in Carol's handwriting. My fingers trembled as I broke the seal. The letter revealed everything. Carol had known Marcus was my childhood neighbor, the boy who used to build forts with me in the backyard. After a traumatic custody battle, his parents had split, and Carol had taken him in temporarily. We were separated shortly after too, young to remember clearly. And when fate brought us back together, she never said a word. She wanted to protect us, I said, trying to justify her actions. Marcus shook his head. No, she wanted to control the narrative. She was afraid of what we might discover about ourselves, about each other. I clutched the letter, heart pounding with betrayal. Our entire relationship had been shadowed by secrets we didn't even know existed. We weren't siblings, not by blood, but we were deeply bound by a forgotten past. And now, standing at the edge of revelation, we had to decide what to do with it. Asterisk, that night, I couldn't sleep. I lay awake replaying every memory of my childhood, wondering which ones might secretly include Marcus. Were those dreams I used to have of playing in a sandbox with a little boy actually memories? It was terrifying not knowing what was real anymore. Marcus came into the bedroom around 3 a.m. He looked like he'd aged 10 years in a day. He sat at the edge of the bed and whispered, "I remember a song you used to sing. It came back to me when I saw the treehouse in your mom's backyard." My stomach dropped. I stared at him, unsure if I wanted to keep digging. Every new truth brought more discomfort. But some part of me needed to know. "What else do you remember?" I asked gently. He hesitated, then said, "You had a pink stuffed rabbit. You called it Mr. Wiggles." That moment shattered everything. I did have a stuffed rabbit with that exact name. I hadn't thought about it in decades. I felt my breath hitch, and the walls of my reality began to twist. We hadn't just grown close by chance. We were pulled toward each other by something deeper, something lost and rediscovered. We spent hours talking, revisiting memories that made more sense now. We weren't related, but we had been emotionally bonded before we even knew what love was. "She erased my place in your story," Marcus said. And she nearly did it again. His words hit like a dagger. My mother had tried to rewrite our timelines, not out of hate, but perhaps out of fear. What did she think would happen? If we learned the truth, that we'd fall apart, that we'd feel tainted? I wasn't sure anymore. The next morning, I confronted my mother. I sat across from her in the kitchen, my hands trembling slightly around my coffee cup. "You told me Marcus was a foster kid who came and went. Why didn't you ever tell me who he really was to me?" She blinked slowly, as if rehearsing an answer. "You were so young, you cried for him for weeks when he left. We thought it would be easier if you forgot." I stared at her, shocked by the calculated nature of her silence. "So you erased him?" "He was just a friend," she said defensively. "You were 5. You made it into something bigger than it was. But her words rang hollow. I wasn't 5 anymore. And now I knew the difference between a fading childhood memory and a ripped-out chapter of my life. I told her everything. Marcus remembered the song, the treehouse, Mr. Wiggles. Her face paled, and for the first time, she looked guilty instead of defensive. I didn't know he remembered so much, she whispered. I hoped time would blur it all. The room was heavy with truth. Why didn't you tell me before the engagement? I asked. Her answer was both simple and devastating, because you were happy, and I was afraid that knowing the truth would ruin that, but the truth hadn't ruined it. The lie had. All this time we were walking on foundations built by omission, and still part of me felt strangely comforted. Marcus hadn't appeared out of nowhere. We were always meant to cross paths again. Now we had to decide, what did we do with that? Asterisk, asterisk, that night, Marcus and I sat in the living room, the old photo album still on the coffee table like a silent witness. We didn't speak at first. We just held hands, letting the weight of everything settle between us. There was no roadmap for this. I remember the way you smelled, he said suddenly, almost shyly. You always had this soft, sweet scent, like strawberries and sunshine. I laughed, tears stinging my eyes. That was my favorite shampoo. I used to save it for special days. It was surreal, talking about those memories like they were shared dreams. We pieced together details, his old red toy car, my blue butterfly backpack, the backyard tire swing. They weren't just childhood memories. They were our memories. Ours, but reality had no intention of being gentle. People will say this is wrong, I said, voice trembling. That it's too strange, too twisted. He nodded. But we didn't grow up as siblings. We were kids who bonded deeply, then were torn apart. He reached into his pocket and pulled out something small, an old plastic ring, scratched and faded. Do you remember this? My heart caught in my throat. You gave me that. You said we were married now. He smiled. I never forgot. That tiny ring held more power than the diamond on my finger. It wasn't about jewelry. It was about promises made in pure, innocent love before life got complicated. And somehow, remembering that made everything feel clearer. Maybe this wasn't a love we stumbled into. Maybe it was one we returned to. The next morning, I woke up before Marcus and walked outside. The early sun cast long shadows on the grass, and the air smelled like dew and pine. I stood there barefoot, letting the cold ground anchor me as my mind spun out my mom joined me on the porch, holding 2 mugs of coffee. She handed me one without saying a word. For a moment, we just sipped in silence, like we were waiting for the courage to arrive between sips. Then she finally spoke. You remembered, didn't you? I nodded slowly, not all at once, but yes, little things. Feelings, mostly. And then ... everything. She looked away, ashamed. I thought I was protecting you both, but maybe I was just protecting myself. Her voice cracked. I turned to face her. You didn't do this to hurt us. You did what you thought was right back then. But we deserve the truth now, all of it. She nodded, tears slipping down her cheeks. You always did love each other, even when you were small. Inside, Marcus appeared at the doorway, rubbing sleep from his eyes. He gave us both a soft, uncertain smile. My mother looked at him for a long moment, then said, I may not understand this, but I see how you look at her. And I know it's real. That moment was our beginning, not the messy one from childhood, but a new one. One chosen, with open eyes and scarred hearts. We didn't know what the future would hold. But for the first time, it felt like we were writing our story ... together.